When my son got married, everyone told me my life was about to feel full again. They said the house would feel louder, warmer, happier. But no one warned me about the silence. I still remember the first night I realized something had changed. I was sitting at the small kitchen table, the one my husband and I bought when our son was still a baby. The light above me flickered softly. My phone was face down beside my cup of tea. I kept telling myself he would call. He always used to. That night the tea went cold, and the phone stayed quiet. I did not cry. I just sat there listening to the clock tick on the wall. Each second felt heavier than the last. That was the beginning. Even though I did not know it yet, I am a mother. Just a simple woman who spent her whole life loving one child with everything she had. My son was not just my son, he was my world. I raised him mostly on my own. His father passed away when my boy was only 9 years old. From that day on, it was just the two of us against life. I worked long hours. I packed his lunches. I stayed awake at night when he was sick. I sat in the front row at every school event, even when my legs ached and my heart felt tired. I never complained, not once, because when he smiled I felt rich. Our home was small but warm. The paint on the walls was old. The couch sagged in the middle, but it was filled with love. Every night we ate dinner together at the same table. We talked about his day, his dreams, the future he wanted. He used to say, "Mom, I will always take care of you." I believed him, not because he promised, but because of the way he looked at me when he said it. When he grew older, things changed slowly, like they always do. He went to college. He moved out for work, but he still called. Every Sunday afternoon, without fail. Sometimes the calls were short, sometimes long. Sometimes he just wanted to hear my voice. And I was always there. Then he met her. I still remember the first time he told me about her. His voice sounded different, lighter, hopeful. "Mom," he said, "I think I met someone special." I smiled even though he could not see me. I told him I was happy for him, and I truly was. When he brought her home for the first time, I cleaned the house from top to bottom. I cooked my best meal. I even bought new curtains, though I could barely afford them. She was polite, quiet, beautiful in a careful way. She smiled when she spoke, but her eyes stayed distant. I told myself she was just shy. I tried to make her feel welcome. I asked about her family, her work, her hobbies. She answered kindly but briefly. My son sat beside her the whole time, holding her hand. I noticed how he leaned toward her, how his attention stayed with her. I told myself that was normal, that was love. After they left that evening, I stood in the doorway long after their car was gone. The house felt too quiet again. Still, I was hopeful. When they announced their engagement, I cried happy tears. I hugged my son tightly. I told him how proud I was. The wedding was beautiful. He looked handsome. She looked radiant. I sat in the front row, hands folded in my lap, smiling through tears. I kept thinking about the little boy I once held in my arms. That day I whispered a silent prayer. I prayed he would be happy. I prayed I would still have a place in his life. After the wedding, everything changed faster than I expected. The Sunday calls stopped coming. At first I told myself he was busy. New marriage, new responsibilities. So I waited. A week passed. Then 2. I finally called him myself. He answered, but his voice felt rushed. "Mom, I'm busy right now. I'll call you later." Later never came. When I invited them over for dinner, he hesitated. "We already have plans," he said. Not unkindly, just distant. I cooked less. I cleaned less. The house felt like it was shrinking around me. Sometimes I would hear neighbors laughing through the walls, families together, voices overlapping. I would sit quietly on my couch, holding my phone, wondering what I had done wrong. I tried not to intrude. I did not want to be that kind of mother, the one people whisper about. So I stayed quiet, but silence can be cruel. Months passed, then a year. I saw pictures of them online. Vacations, holidays, smiling faces. I noticed something painful. I was not in any of them. When I asked if I could visit, the answer was always gentle but firm. "Maybe another time, Mom." Another time became never. The first time I truly felt erased was my birthday. I woke up early that morning, the same way I always did. I made myself breakfast. I dressed nicely. I waited. No call, no message. In the evening my phone buzzed. Just once. "Happy birthday, Mom. Hope you're well." That was it. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I placed the phone down and turned off the light. That night I cried quietly into my pillow, careful not to make a sound. I told myself I should be grateful. He remembered, at least a little, but deep down I felt something breaking. I had spent my whole life being needed, and suddenly I was invisible. I never told anyone how lonely I felt. I smiled when people asked about my son. I said he was busy. I said marriage changes things. But inside I felt abandoned. I did not hate my daughter-in-law. I truly did not. But I felt like I had lost my son to a world where I no longer fit. Sometimes I would walk past his old room. I never changed it. The bed was still made. The shelves still held his books. I would sit there and remember bedtime stories, school mornings, late-night talks. I wondered if he ever thought about me, or if I had already faded into the background of his new life. And that was before the day everything finally came crashing down, the day I realized just how far away my son truly was. The small rejections did not arrive all at once. They came quietly, almost politely, so quietly that for a long time I kept telling myself I was imagining them. I would reach for my phone, type a message, then erase it. I did not want to disturb them. I did not want to seem needy. So I waited for them to reach out first. Most days they did not. When I did hear from my son, the conversations felt different, shorter, careful. He no longer asked how I was really doing. He asked if I was okay. And before I could answer fully, he would move on to something else. Sometimes I could hear her in the background. Her voice was never unkind, just distant, like someone talking from another room. Once during a call, I asked him if they wanted to come over for dinner the following weekend. I had already imagined the meal. I would cook his favorite dish, the one he loved as a child. There was a pause. "We'll see," he said. "I'll have to check." He never checked. That weekend I cooked the meal anyway, out of habit, out of hope. I packed it into containers and froze it, telling myself maybe they would come another time. I started noticing how often I was the one reaching out, how rarely he did. When I mentioned this gently, trying not to sound hurt, he laughed a little. "Mom, nothing's changed. You worry too much." But something had changed. I felt it in my bones. One afternoon I stopped by their apartment unannounced. I know now that was a mistake, but at the time I was lonely. I just wanted to see my son's face. When he opened the door, his smile froze for just a second. It was small, but I saw it. "Oh," he said. "Hi, Mom." I apologized right away. I said I should have called first. He stepped outside instead of inviting me in. "We were just about to head out," he said. I nodded, pretending I had not noticed his coat hanging on the chair behind him. I handed him a small bag. Inside was homemade bread, still warm. He thanked me quickly, then hugged me with one arm. The door closed softly behind him. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of their life inside. Then I walked away. That night I told myself not to do that again. I learned to ask first, always. Most of the time the answer was no. Sometimes they were busy. Sometimes they were tired. Sometimes they already had plans. I stopped asking as often. Holidays became harder. The first Thanksgiving after his marriage, I assumed we would spend it together. We always had. A week before I called to confirm. "We're spending it with her family this year," he said. My heart sank, but I smiled into the phone. "Of course," I said, "maybe next year." Next year came, and it was the same. Christmas was worse. I wrapped gifts carefully. I wrote long cards. I imagined us sitting around the tree. Instead I spent the day alone. They stopped by briefly in the evening, just long enough to drop off gifts and leave. She stayed in the car. My son hugged me at the door. "We have to go," he said. "Her parents are waiting." I nodded. I told him to drive safely. After they left, I sat on the couch surrounded by unopened presents. I did not open them until days later. The misunderstandings grew quietly. One time my son mentioned they were thinking of moving to another state. He said it casually, like it was no big deal. I felt panic rise in my chest. "So far?" I asked. He sighed. "Mom, you don't need to worry about everything." I wanted to explain that it was not worry. It was fear. Fear of losing him completely. But I stayed silent. I began to notice how careful I had to be with my words. Anything I said could be misunderstood. If I asked too many questions, I was interfering. If I stayed quiet, I was distant. Once I told him I missed him. There was another pause. "Mom, you have to understand," he said slowly. "I have my own life now." Those words stayed with me. My own life. As if I had never had one. As if my life had not been built around him for decades. I started feeling like a guest in his world. Someone who needed permission. I tried to build a life outside of him. I joined a small community group. I took walks in the park. But loneliness follows you quietly. It sits beside you even when you are surrounded by people. One afternoon I overheard a conversation that cut deeper than anything else. I had gone to their place again, this time invited. I was helping fold laundry. I heard her voice from the kitchen. "She's always around," she said. Soft. "Not meant for me." My son replied quietly. "I know. I'll talk to her." My hands froze. Always around. I left soon after, pretending I had somewhere to be. That night I lay awake replaying those words. I started pulling back after that. I stopped calling as often. I waited for him to reach out. Days turned into weeks. Silence became familiar. When I finally asked him if I had done something wrong, his tone changed. "Mom, why do you always think that?" he asked. "You're making things difficult." I apologized. Even though I did not know what I was apologizing for. The truth is, I was trying to shrink myself, to take up less space, to be easier to handle. I stopped offering advice, stopped sharing stories, stopped asking questions. I became polite, distant, like a stranger, and yet it was never enough. One evening he called me unexpectedly. I felt a rush of relief, but the call was short. He needed a document I had, something from his childhood. I found it quickly and sent it. He thanked me and hung up. I stared at the phone, feeling used in a way I had never felt before. I wondered if he still saw me as his mother, or just someone connected to his past. I never blamed her out loud. I knew marriage was complicated, but I could not ignore the feeling that I no longer belonged, that I was being slowly pushed to the edges. I was still there, but barely. And then came the moment that changed everything. The moment I realized that the distance was no longer accidental. It was a choice. The emotional breaking point did not come with shouting. It did not come with harsh words or slammed doors. It came quietly, like everything else. It came on an ordinary day. I remember the weather clearly. It was raining softly, the kind of rain that makes the world feel smaller and slower. I had just finished cleaning the house, not because it needed it, but because keeping busy was easier than sitting with my thoughts. That morning I received a message from my son. "We need to talk." Those 4 words made my hands shake. I read the message again and again. I told myself not to panic. Maybe it was nothing serious. Maybe he just wanted to share news. I replied quickly, "Of course. When can you come over this evening?" he asked. My heart felt heavy, but I agreed. All day my mind raced. I replayed every conversation we had had over the past year. Every word, every pause. I wondered what I had done wrong. I chose my clothes carefully that evening. Simple, neutral, nothing that would draw attention. When I arrived at their place, the lights were on, but the room felt cold, too quiet. She was sitting on the couch. My son stood near the window. They both looked serious. "Please sit," he said. I sat slowly, folding my hands in my lap like I used to during parent-teacher meetings, waiting to be told something important, something that might hurt. He cleared his throat. "Mom," he began. "This isn't easy to say." I nodded. I told him to take his time. He looked at her. She nodded back. Then he looked at me again. "We feel like you're having a hard time adjusting," he said carefully. "And it's putting pressure on us." I felt my chest tighten. "I don't understand," I said softly. He took a breath. "You call a lot. You ask a lot of questions. Sometimes it feels like you don't trust us to live our own life." The words landed slowly, one by one. "I only ask because I care," I whispered. She shifted on the couch. "We need boundaries," she said gently, but firmly. Boundaries. That word felt sharp. I had heard it before, but never like this. My son continued. "We think it would be best if you gave us some space. Less calls, less visits. Space." I looked at him, trying to recognize the face of the boy I raised, the one who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the one who held my hand when his father died. "I didn't know I was causing harm," I said. My voice was steady, but my heart was breaking. He sighed. "We know you mean well, but things are different now." "Different?" I nodded slowly. "I can do that," I said. "I don't want to be a burden." The word slipped out before I could stop it. A burden. He did not deny it. That hurt the most. When I stood to leave, he hugged me. Briefly. She stayed seated. At the door he said, "We'll talk soon, okay?" I smiled. "Of course," I said. But I knew something had ended. The rain had stopped by the time I reached my car. The streetlights reflected on the wet pavement. I sat behind the wheel and cried. Not loudly, just quietly, like someone who had learned not to make a scene. From that day on, I did exactly what they asked. I stopped calling. I stopped visiting. I stopped checking in. Days passed, then weeks. No messages, no calls. The silence was complete. At first I told myself this was temporary, that they just needed time. But deep down, I felt something else. I felt replaced. I watched life move on without me. I saw pictures online again. New furniture, new friends, new routines. Still no sign of me. I realized something painful during that time. My absence did not leave a hole. It went unnoticed. One night I sat alone at my kitchen table again. The same table, the same chair. But this time I did not wait for the phone to ring. I accepted that it would not. I thought about all the years I had spent being strong, being patient, putting others first, and I wondered when I had stopped mattering. The breaking point came weeks later. On a day I will never forget, I received an envelope in the mail. It was addressed in my son's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a short letter. "Mom, we've decided it would be best if you didn't come by unannounced anymore. And for a while we think it's better to keep some distance. We hope you understand." That was it. No warmth, no reassurance, no love, just distance. I sat there holding the paper, staring at the words until they blurred. I felt something inside me finally give way. Not anger, not bitterness, just deep, quiet grief. I realized then that my son was no longer drifting away. He had already gone. That night I walked into his old room. I stood in the doorway for a long time. Then I did something I had never done before. I packed it up. The books, the clothes, the memories. I placed them gently into boxes, not because I wanted to forget, but because I needed to stop living in the past. As I closed the last box, I whispered something I had never allowed myself to say. "I have to let you go." It was the hardest thing I had ever done, and yet it was only the beginning of what came next. After that letter, the days became very quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The kind that presses on your chest when you wake up and reminds you that no one is waiting for you anymore. For a while I moved through my days like a shadow. I woke up, I ate simple meals, I went to bed early. There was no reason to stay up late. The house felt different after I packed away my son's things. Lighter, but also emptier. I did not hear his footsteps in my memory anymore. I did not imagine him walking through the door. At first that scared me. Then slowly something else began to happen. I started noticing myself. I noticed how tired I had been for years, how much of my energy had gone into holding on to someone who was already leaving. I noticed how often I had put my own needs last, how often I had made myself small to make others comfortable. One morning I looked at myself in the mirror and really saw the woman staring back. She looked older than I remembered, but she also looked strong. That day I did something simple but new. I went for a walk without my phone. I walked slowly through my neighborhood. I listened to the birds. I watched the trees move in the breeze. For the first time in a long time I was not waiting for a call. I began to take small steps back into my own life. I signed up for a local class at the community center. Nothing special, just a weekly gathering where people painted and talked quietly. At first I sat in the corner and listened. Then one day someone asked me my name, and they listened when I spoke. That felt strange and good. I started cooking again, not for anyone else, just for me. I tried new recipes. I set the table even when I was alone. I realized how often I had rushed through meals before, how often I had eaten standing up. Now I sat down. I took my time. The loneliness did not disappear overnight. Some days it still felt heavy, but it no longer defined me. I began to understand something important. Losing my son the way I had did not mean I had lost my worth. It meant my role had changed. And change, even painful change, creates space. Space for growth, space for healing, space for new beginnings. I started volunteering at a small library nearby. I helped organize books. I talked to children after school. They reminded me of my son when he was young, curious, eager. But this time I did not cling to the feeling. I let it pass through me gently. I also began writing letters, not to my son, to myself. I wrote about the years I survived, the love I gave, the strength I carried without knowing it. I forgave myself for mistakes I had made, for moments I had been too much, or not enough. I learned that being a good mother did not mean losing myself completely. It meant loving deeply, and also knowing when to step back. One evening, while organizing old papers, I found a photo of my son as a child. He was smiling widely, missing a tooth. For the first time I smiled back without crying. I placed the photo in a drawer instead of on the wall. I was no longer living there. Weeks turned into months. Life found a new rhythm. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. I did not recognize the number at first. When I answered, my heart skipped. It was my son. "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice sounded unsure. I did not rush. I did not cry. I simply said hello. There was a pause. "I just wanted to check in," he said. "It's been a while." "Yes," I replied calmly. "It has." He asked how I was doing. And for the first time I told the truth. "I'm okay," I said. "I'm learning." He did not know how to respond to that. We talked for a few minutes. Nothing heavy, nothing deep. When the call ended, I felt something surprising. Peace. Not hope, not expectation, just peace. I realized then that I was no longer waiting for him to come back and save me from loneliness. I had saved myself, and that changed everything. After that phone call, I did not rush to tell anyone about it. Not because it was unimportant, but because I wanted to protect the calm I had built inside myself. For a long time, every call from my son had carried weight. Hope, fear, expectation. This one felt different. It felt like a small bridge, not a promise, just a connection. Days passed, then weeks. Sometimes he called, sometimes he did not. And for the first time, that did not break me. When he did call, I noticed something new in myself. I listened more than I spoke. I did not rush to offer advice. I did not ask too many questions. I let the silence exist between us. It felt strange at first, but also respectful. One evening he asked if he could come by, just for a short visit, he said. I agreed, without preparing a feast, without cleaning the house from top to bottom. When he arrived, I hugged him, slowly, fully. He looked around the house and noticed the changes. "It looks different," he said. "Yes," I replied. "So do I." We sat at the table with tea, the same table, but it felt different now. He spoke about his life, his work, his worries. I listened, then he paused. "I know things haven't been easy," he said quietly. I nodded. "They haven't," I agreed. I did not accuse. I did not explain everything. I simply spoke from my heart. "I love you," I said. "I always will. But I'm learning to love you without losing myself." He looked at me for a long moment. "I didn't realize how much distance hurt you," he said. I smiled gently. "Sometimes love hurts when it changes," I said. "But we grow through it." He stayed for an hour. Then he left. And that was okay. I did not feel the old ache afterward. I felt grounded. In the months that followed, our relationship found a new shape. We spoke occasionally. We visited sometimes. Not out of obligation, but out of choice. I also made something clear, softly but firmly. "I won't push," I told him once, "but I won't disappear either." He understood, and so did I. I no longer waited by the phone. I no longer measured my worth by his attention. I lived my life fully, and when he was part of it, it was a gift, not a need. One afternoon he brought his wife with him. It was the first time she had come in a long while. She was polite, reserved. But this time I did not try to impress her. I was simply myself. Before they left, she thanked me. "For giving us space," she said. I nodded. "And for giving myself room to breathe," I replied. She looked surprised, then thoughtful. As the door closed behind them, I felt no sadness, only gratitude. Gratitude for what was, and for what had changed. I used to believe that being a good mother meant holding on forever. That love meant sacrifice without limits. But I learned something different. Love also means letting go. Letting people grow, letting yourself grow too. My son did not erase me. He simply stepped into a new chapter. and I learned to write my own. If you are listening to this and feeling forgotten, remember this: you matter. Your story matters. And your life is not over just because it looks different now. Sometimes the quiet is not emptiness, it is space. And in that space we find ourselves again.